Well, hello there, everyone. Welcome to our webcast here today, brought to you all by Citrix ShareFile. My thanks to their team for getting this event organized. The Competitive Edge is where you're at, so hopefully it's the right place. It's the event that you expected to be watching as you joined us here today. Susan Solovic is our featured guest. She is known as the small business expert. I'll give a little more information about Susan in a moment. My name is James Hilliard. Glad to be here as the moderator for the event. And to our title, right, the competitive edge. In talking with Susan, I had shared with her, and many of you that have joined these events before might know that I'm a Little League coach and a soccer coach, and so we talk about competition a lot with our kiddos. And so Susan, I was thinking about competition, and often you might hear someone in sports talk about they're looking for that little change, that little edge that's going to help them. Getting a competitive edge, if someone's really kind of searching for that, looking for that, how much of a change do you feel they really have to make to find that edge to really propel them forward?
Well, that's a great question, James. And actually, when you think of change and innovation, a lot of times we think about the disruptive things that happen in industry in our world today. But really, those minor, small changes can really produce major results. And I happen to live on a golf course. I don't play golf, but I know enough about it to know that if you just change your stance a little bit or move your foot a different way, you can really change your game. And think about this. Water is very hot at 211 degrees, but at 212 degrees, it's boiling. So what I want people to understand is, we need to get some fuel under your business and get you boiling so you can soar to success.
Okay, with that little analogy of the boiling water, how many folks, entrepreneurs or wannabe entrepreneurs, might be inside a business somewhere? How many folks do you find in the 185 to 210 degrees that just need a little more compared to those that might be down at 125 degrees? There's a little more heat that needs to go for those people. How many are really, really close and maybe don't know it?
Well, I think that what happens in business today, and particularly smaller organizations, is you want a blueprint. So your cookie cutter approach. You're doing the same old thing as everybody else is doing it, and pretty much the same way. I don't care what your marketing spin says about your organization, it's pretty much the same thing. So organizations find themselves basically in the commodity business, and they're constantly competing on price. And you're right, James. I mean, with just a little extra effort, just because the greatest sports figure, and I happen to be a pianist, so I'm going to use that, the greatest pianist on earth may not be the most talented pianist, but it's one who works the hardest, who puts in that extra half an hour of practice every day, who's willing to listen to ways to enhance the way they hold their hands or the way they sit at the instrument. So, those are the things that business owners and business leaders too need to really look introspectively to their organization, and am I really giving it that extra effort to succeed?
I tell my little leaguers, you are never going to have an angry coach if we're getting effort. And I'm not going to be an angry coach anyway, but I'm going to get on a kid and say, is that real? Did you swing 100% or was that like 70? Was it 80%? What more can you do? Are you really giving your effort, not only for yourself, but for your team?
And James, I have to tell you, I have a very, very good friend who used to be a Wall Street lawyer. She gave that up to raise her children and really worked hard with her children to be the very, very best they could. And her younger son was in a spelling contest and won the state contest one year. The next year, he was preparing, and she kept saying, I don't think you're ready. You're not really putting forth the effort. And he said, oh, Mom, I'll be fine. I'm sure you hear that all the time. Well, they went to the spelling bee, and he came in second place. So they got in the car, and he said, well, Mom, what do you think? And she said, what do you think? And he said, well, I came in second. And she said, and that was your best effort? And he looked at her, and she said, honey, if you couldn't do any better, I wouldn't be concerned. But you could have won that if you'd really put forth the effort. I am not going to say I'm proud of you. And boy, it was a real lesson for him. And that kid has done really, really well now.
And sometimes I think we forget as adults that that's a good message for us to hear as adults, to remind us, to kick us in the pants a little bit. So folks, if you're enjoying what we've been talking about so far, that's what we're going to continue doing. So Susan, let me give a little more background, folks, if you're not aware. Award-winning kind of serial entrepreneur and someone who thinks about things but also does things. So we're glad to have her, and in the perspective she'll be able to share here. New York Times, Wall Street Journal, USA Today, best-selling author and also media personality. You've probably seen her on several cable news shows and business shows. You can follow Susan. I'm going to actually chat all this out right now, Susan. A couple of handles and hashtag today's ShareFile. Susan may tweet a couple of things as we go through the presentation, so I just put those out for the entire audience. Maggie, you were the Margie, I'm sorry, you were the first one to log on in, so welcome to you. We got Debbie out there and John, Debbie, Curtis, it looks like Andres. You just came in as the last person on the list, and more coming in. So welcome to all of you. Glad to have you here. Questions, comments, get those to us throughout the presentation. If there are things that we need to stop down, discuss, talk about, absolutely we'll mix those in. Susan has probably like about a 30-minute or so presentation that is prepared here. We'll go through that again. We might have a stop down here or there, and then we'll come on back and we'll do some general Q&A towards the end. I'm going to kill our webcams for now, just so folks can focus on the material that we'll put on the screen now, and you all see that, as well as the Facebook page where you can follow Susan, and then the Twitter information as well. So with that, Susan, let me turn things over to you. Let's kind of dive into this deeper. And again, folks, we're looking at the competitive edge. You see that we'll also be giving a big focus towards the people here, and part of those people are you and our audience. So again, be part of it. And Susan, with that, the floor is yours.
Well, thanks, James. And by the way, if you don't get your questions in today, feel free to tweet me or join me on Facebook, and I will do my best to get back to you and answer questions for you at any time. I'm very passionate about helping businesses succeed. So let's get started. So, you know, James, the really cold hard facts about business today is there's such rapid change that it really makes it very, very difficult for a company to remain relevant and sustain its success. And that's why only 71 of the original Fortune 500 companies remain. I mean, if you just think back when you were growing up, think about some of the brand names that don't even exist anymore. I mean, there was a Montgomery Ward store in the Courthouse Square in the little town I grew up in, and I bet a lot of people out there listening today don't even know what Montgomery Ward was. But let's go a little bit more recently. One of my favorite stores, Linens and Things, gone. Circuit City, gone. Radio Shack, gone. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And, you know, you look at these things and you think, why? I mean, these were companies that were on the top of their game. And was it really bad management? Was it really that their leaders were just inept? No. It was because they didn't understand that you've got to constantly change. You know, they buried their head in the sand and they said, you know what, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And my mantra, James, is if it ain't broke, start fixing it anyway. Because highly performing companies today must be innovative and they've got to be agile. You've got to be able to compete, to turn on a dime, to follow market trends, and to remain relevant to your customer base. And one of the ways you do that is through the right people. You've got to have the right people on your team to create that competitive edge. One of my favorite slogans is from Ronald Reagan, who said, surround yourself with the best people you find, delegate authority, and don't interfere as long as the policy you've decided upon is being carried out. You know, a lot of people didn't think President Reagan was going to succeed, but he did that. He surrounded himself with very strong, solid people, and that's what we need to do as business leaders today. So how do you build a, whoops, sorry James, I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. So how do you build a team with a competitive edge? Well, it's really about getting the right people in the right seats and all rolling in the right direction. I think a lot of us in business, we get so overwhelmed, stressed out, we're busy, and we think a lot of times, you know, a warm body is better than nobody at all. But that's really not the case. You really have to have people who are in there, they're sharing your values, they're sharing your vision, and they're ready to perform, and they have a vested interest in the success of your company. And by the way, talking about values, when you set the values for your company, when you hire people, you need to make sure that, you know, they really are in line with your values. Skills can always be taught, but values don't change. And it's very important. I know the CEO of Zappos always says he will fire an employee no matter how well they're performing if they don't live up to the company values. That's how important it is for Zappos. And I mean, we all know how successful that company is. I don't know how many ladies are out there watching, but Zappos is at my door frequently. So, and you have to let underperforming employees go. You've got to cut the dead weight. And that's tough because, you know, I think we all want to, you know, rescue people and believe that if we work with them a little bit more, that they're gonna do a better job. But the reality of the situation is that when you have performing employees, it's not just about that one employee. It is about your entire organization. They could be affecting your company morale, they're affecting productivity, they might even be turning your customers away. And Gallup did a survey and ironically found that 70% of today's workforce, 70% is disengaged. And that's costing $550 billion in lost productivity. And another concern here is they found that disengaged employees are more likely to steal from your company. They're more likely to create negativity with coworkers. They're absent more frequently, and as I said earlier, they can actually drive your customers away. Can you afford that with your business? No, we need the right people. And when I talk about the right people, diversity is really critical here. If you're hiring people who all look like you and think like you, how in the world are you going to build innovation into the DNA of your company? Because you're all going to be thinking alike. And the McKinsey Group did a study, and they found that companies with the most diverse workforce have 35% better revenues and better results than the industry mean. So they're really excelling and growing and becoming highly performing because they've got diversity on their side. And they're tapping into their team's creativity. It's not the same old, same old. It's not that cookie cutter approach. They're embracing different perspectives, experiences, and viewpoints. And they're looking at different genders, different races, different ethnicity. But I'm also going to add something to this equation, generational diversity. You know, James, you might not know this, but for the first time, baby boomers are outnumbered by millennials. Did you know that?
I did. There's a gentleman, Michael Parrish Dudell. He works with Shark Tank on ABC, and he has done a lot. I've had a chance to talk with him, and that number is out there, and they're a major force out there now in the workplace.
They really are, and it's going to continue because the baby boomers are retiring and moving on, right? So, but what happens is, you know, the work habits often clash in that environment. You know, I know a lot of baby boomers. I happen to be a baby boomer myself, and, you know, we often look at millennials and we say, they're slackers. They aren't motivated. They don't want to work hard. Man, when we were their age, this is what we were doing, and we were out there and working from sun up to sundown, you know, and yet baby boom, or the millennials rather, they look at those of us who didn't grow up with technology in our crib as being rigid and little out of date, old time, old school. The bottom line is that each of these groups really brings value to your team. Each group has strengths. And I'll talk a little bit more about what the millennials bring to the party, but you know, baby boomers, I mean, we tended to follow directions. This is what we were told to do. By golly, that's what we're going to do. And we understood authority. Millennials tend to question things more. They need to understand the why. They want to understand the strategy, the initiatives. They don't just take what you're saying and run with it without at least understanding and asking the right questions. And to create innovation in your company, you need people that are willing to step up to the plate and ask those critical questions, those tough questions about why are we doing this? I worked with one company once that started a portal for small businesses. And their marketing team, it was an edict given down, make this work. And they brought me in as a consultant, and I looked at it and I thought, this is just a redundant activity. There's so many other things out there similar to this. Why would small businesses now take more time, sign up here, and work with this particular portal? And I kept asking that question, why? What is your purpose? And they couldn't tell me. And honestly, the program failed, but there was no why behind the initiative. And that's why these types of different perspectives and generations are important to innovation.
Susan, it seems like, just on that little theme there have been a lot of companies we've seen in the dot-com era, then the post-dot-com bust and all that, where we got a lot of solutions to problems that weren't really there. And
right.
And in part of my observation is that people weren't asking, do we really need this? Is this really solving a problem? Is this a need to have? Does this forward us either as a company, as a society, or is it just we're doing it because we can,
Right.
and some of that critical thinking doesn't seem like it was there, in my observation, in some of the bygone companies and ideas that have come to market.
Right. Well, it's sort of like it's cool, it's technology, and it's just technology because, wow, we can do it, right? But, when I raised venture capital for a company I had a few years ago, the one thing I learned was the first thing you have to get out of there is what's the pain in the marketplace and why are you the solution? If you can't answer those two questions, then you're going down the wrong path. And I think people do lose sight of that. They get all excited about their own ideas and, oh, you rah, 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 let's go after this. It's going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. And then they get out there and nobody else really feels that way. So you're absolutely right about that, James. So when you're trying to build your team, it's really important that you attract and retain the right people. I actually read some information about Chick-fil-A, and their philosophy is that you hire for life, not just for the position. So yeah, you want somebody to get the job done, but you look at the whole employee, the whole candidate, and see how can they flourish, how can they help your organization in a much more holistic way than just getting particular tasks done. And that's important because your labor acquisition cost is extremely high. When you bring on a new employee, it costs your business a lot of money. It takes time out from you and your team to train them. There might be additional training. They've got to get up to speed, so they may not be as productive to begin with. All the paperwork, getting them set up on payroll, et cetera, et cetera. And if it doesn't work out, you've lost that money. And now you're back to the drawing board. I've seen companies that it's just a revolving door. Employees are in and out. That is not a strong company. And that is not a company that's going to be innovative and it's going to be actually sustainable going forward. So you don't rush to fill a position. I always say, hire slowly and smart, fire fast. You have to understand what's your employment brand. You've got to understand that every company has an employment brand, either by design or by default. And that's why we have these contests, the greatest place to work on earth or whatever. And employers work hard to create that brand. And so if you're not thinking about what your employment brand is, it might not be what you want it to be. But you want to have your employees out there beating the drums for you, telling their good, talented friends, wow, this is the best place to work, because they are really your best hiring resource. And in line with that, when I was talking earlier about underperforming employees, you've got to cut the dead weight. You can't get married to any particular employee. And when I said fire fast, it's hard to do. Nobody likes to fire anybody. I hate it. I might break out in hives when I have to fire someone. But I know from my own experience, if you don't do it in a timely fashion, you're hurting your organization. And relationships are a big part of business, right? But in that sense, you've got to put your business needs and objectives first. Friendship is friendship, business is business, and you've got to put your business first. So don't be afraid to fire fast. Hire smart and slowly, fire fast.
Susan, let me get in here because I want to take this back to our kind of opening conversation about let's look at this idea of hiring someone, and I'm sure we've got some folks from HR related positions, or that's one of the hats they wear during the day, probably wearing various hats. What is kind of a 1% change that someone might do in terms of that? Let's take the idea of don't rush to fill the position. Leave it open for 2 extra days, get 10 more resumes in, go for 3 more walks with your dog to think about your candidates before you make the hire. What's a practical thing people could do there to really kind of slow that down a little bit?
Well, I actually was coaching a woman who had a company that had grown to a fairly large organization, and she was struggling with some of her employees who weren't, rising to the occasion of where her company was. And so I asked her to really step back and take the personalities out of it, take the relationships. These were people who'd started with her when the company was small. And I said, take all that out and look at really the results you're getting. And is that what you want? Are they really going to be able to take your business to the next level? And if the answer to that question is no, then, as I said, you have that duty to put your business first in order to keep growing. I mean, none of us really like change, let's face it, right? but some of us are more resistant to change than others. And in an innovative company with a true competitive edge, change is what it's all about. And you need people who are willing to jump on board and say, okay, I get it, this is the way we're going now, and not drag their feet and be the dead weight. So I think that is 1%. James, did I answer your question?
Well, I think you did, and I'll add just one other comment here to get your thoughts, and we'll continue on here. But part of it, if this the person you were working with, you were coaching this woman, and if she took the time to look back and say, yeah, some of these people aren't helping me get to that next level, then her hiring perspective hopefully would change. So the next time something came up, she didn't hire someone like she had in the past. She hired someone a little bit different to bring that extra edge, to bring that maybe competitive spirit, or to bring that fire. Maybe someone from a little bit of a different mold than the folks that she had hired originally. Is that a fair kind of perspective and thought?
Absolutely. I think when you're starting out and starting to grow your organization, and you tend to hire people that maybe you know, or someone else knows them, maybe even family members, and that's really often just a recipe for disaster as you're growing your organization. And what happens though is, as I said, we build those relationships, and we hate to let somebody go because they've been with us since the start, or wow, they're really a good person, or whatever our rationale is for it. But once again, I stress to everyone, put your business first. Where do you want to go, and are these the right people to get you where you want to go? Do they see your vision? Do they share your values? And as I said before, is everybody rowing in the same direction? I mean, that's pretty simple strategy, but it's harder to execute than it sounds.
Good stuff, folks. Keep questions and comments coming in. Type into the queue. I've seen Genesis, Morris, Jim, and others with some questions and comments out there. So keep those coming on in. We'll mix some more in as we go along. But with this, let's come on back here. We're looking at the competitive edge, some of these real-time results.
That's right. I think, James, now I've worked in the corporate world before, and I've gotten annual performance reviews, and I've given them. And quite frankly, annual performance reviews are dead. They're dead. I mean, when I would fill out annual performance reviews for my employees or my team, I'd sit there and I'd think, okay, well, what really happened? And unless they'd done something really egregious throughout the year, I mean, it was pretty much the same old mark the boxes and, okay, we'll sit down and talk about it. But by the time you get in today's dynamic economy, by the time you get to that annual performance review, I mean, everything that's happened is so outdated. How do you possibly evaluate someone? And quite honestly, I think today, especially the millennials, they want this real-time feedback. They want to know, am I doing this correctly? Are we going the right way? So agile companies that are flexible, they're constantly reviewing with their employees or team members in real time practically. Here's what's going well, here's what isn't. Giving them an opportunity, maybe one-on-one meetings are popular. It gives you the opportunity to set real priorities with them, to talk about their achievements or coach them or talk about how we can develop them. You really want to give them the opportunity to flourish in your organization, and that once a year sit down, check the boxes, you know, here you go, and we're off, and oh, by the way, you got a 3% raise. You know, that's dead. It's not what is innovative today, and it's not what's going to create that competitive edge. You really want your employees to constantly be looking at the direction and the vision of where you're going as a company, participating, investing in it, and making sure that we're always driving the ball forward in order to remain relevant. So I think that's critical and something that's really pretty new. And James, I found this cartoon. I just had to share it with you. So, you know, the boss is sitting there, guys, at the desk, and he says, your evaluation is based on the next 30 seconds. Go. I mean, that's a little extreme, but honestly, I mean, you think about how rapidly things are changing. And, you know, I talk in my book about my new book that's coming out in October about every aspect of your business and how you need to apply these kind of same concepts of, you know, is this the right direction? And being willing to pivot and change, you know, and honestly, small organizations are much better equipped to do that, to keep that agility and that ability to pivot and be flexible than large organizations are. I work with a lot of large brands, and I can tell you it's very difficult for them to switch gears, you know, to turn the Queen Mary around, whereas if you got a little scarab, you know, boom, you're turned in seconds. So, you know, it really does make a big difference, and so that real-time feedback is critical.
Let me ask you one more question on that front, back to and the cartoon is great. I do
Yeah,
love that. I can imagine someone, though, and when I talk about generations in the workplace, obviously we talk to a kind of a stereotype of age. I know plenty of 25-year-olds that have a Gen X like me or a boomer mindset, and I know several boomers and Gen Xers that have figured out a millennial mindset, right? So, but for those, I can imagine someone could kind of freak out if they were used to those yearly reviews, and that's where they come from, and all of a sudden it's going to be different. That could get someone nervous. It could impact how they work. Is that then a plan that really needs to be published? It needs to be shared. It needs to be communicated. Again, it's a small little change, but it's something that really has to be understood by everybody so that we're all on the same page.
Right, absolutely. Communication is critical here, and you're right. I mean, if you're used to a certain mode of operation in your organization as either the business leader or as an employee, those kinds of changes can be unsettling. So yes, you explain what's happening, why it's happening. As I said, understanding the why behind anything is critical for an innovative company. So understanding the why and what it means to all of us as an organization, not just each individual, but what it means to all of us. And that the goal is, yes, we want to make the organization successful, but we also want to make each one of our team members really flourish. We want them to be the very best that they can be. And one of the questions that I often ask people when I hire them is, where do you want to be in 5 years? And I clearly tell them, don't say, yeah, I want to be working for you, Susan. No, you don't have to say that to me. What I want to know is, what are their aspirations and how can I help them reach those aspirations? And I believe that that's how you really get an employee who understands that you believe in them as a whole person, not just somebody sitting in the chair doing tasks. And so I think the communication is critical. I think that reviewing results on a regular basis, whether it's your business results or revenue results, whatever it is, reviewing them regularly instead of monthly or quarterly or yearly gives you that edge to make adjustments, to stay the course, or say, you know what, this ain't working, we're going to go another direction and figure it out.
Yeah, we need to make that pivot. I told you before we start, I have 3 kiddos, 7th grade, 4th grade, 1st grade. In our schools now, they don't just do a spring and fall conference. They spread the conferences out so that if there's a child that's struggling with, say, reading, they don't wait 2 months to conference time and let mom and dad know about that. They get into some conferences early to help that person along. I see the same thing in business. If you're in that mindset, you can help that good employee maybe continue to be great, or you recognize, hey, we've been checking in the last several weeks, months, we're not seeing a change, we do need to let you go so that we can move forward. So it just gives so much more insight.
When you fire someone, it should never come as a surprise to the employee. They should recognize that they're not working out, that they're not living up to what the expectations are, and they should not be shocked or surprised. If an organization surprises a team member or employee when they terminate the relationship, then shame on them. And honestly, that organization is going to suffer as a result of it because the employment brand is going to be diminished, it's going to be tainted. I mean, who wants to go to work for an organization that would treat someone that way? Just walk in one day and say, you're fired, and you think wow, what have I done? I've been working hard, I'm here, I think I'm producing results, you haven't said anything to me. I mean, that's bad management all the way around.
I've never heard that before. For me, that's a tweetable moment right there, folks, using the hashtag ShareFile. You can also follow Susan. I put all that out in the chat. But that's a total tweetable moment right there. I've never heard that. Love hearing that, that it should not come as a surprise that someone was going to
Yeah. So as a business leader, to build innovation and create a competitive edge, you really want to have an inspired team. As I said before, you want to give employees an opportunity to flourish. So in small organizations, as an entrepreneur, I mean, I will admit I've been guilty of this myself. You think you know everything. And Albert Einstein said once that a true genius understands that he doesn't know much about anything. So, I think that what you can't do is micromanage. It can't be, it's my way or the highway. And I think we'd all probably agree that Thomas Edison is probably one of the most brilliant minds we've ever seen in this country. And when he would work with his assistants, he would share a general idea with them, and then he'd simply walk away and let them see if they could figure out how to make what he wanted. And so he was giving them, empowering them. As one of my old bosses used to say to me, Susan, I'm giving you the opportunity to fail. And I thought that was the weirdest phrase until I realized that he was empowering me to do what I thought needed to be done to succeed. And that gives employees such a sense of accomplishment, that empowerment. And I switch these around. I talk about building ACE teams. So the team members are accountable. They're accountable for their actions. There's no, it's not my job, or, well, he did it, or she did it, or, well, I didn't have the right resources. They're accountable. They're collaborative. They work with each other. No egos, no prima donnas. They're there to produce a shared vision. And as I said before, they're empowered. And I can remember when one of my companies, it was an internet business, and when we first started it out, we were video on the internet. I was the writer, the producer, the on-air talent. I mean, you name it, I was doing it. And as we grew and the number of employees grew, I remember once getting a project in the door, and then a few weeks later, my team came in and sat down, and they were so excited. Look what we did. And they showed me the outcome, and I looked at it, and I went, wow. Was it exactly the way I would have done it? No. Did that make it wrong? No. And I was so proud of them, and I realized at that moment I had really built an organization. It wasn't all about me anymore. Everybody was sharing the vision, and they were excited. I was excited for them. And I also think we need to look at our team members and embrace their entire talents. See them as a whole person, as I said earlier. Going back to my internet company, I hired a gentleman to be a producer, digital media, videographer, etc. And it wasn't too long that I realized, hey, you know what, this guy isn't just good behind the camera, he's really good in front of the camera too. And so we started using him for on-air talent as well as his talents that he was bringing in the production role. So it was fun for him because he got to do things that he hadn't been doing before. So he was really feeling like we were appreciating him for his entire person. And one of the best examples of this, I think, is State Street Bank. So James, I know you probably follow TED Talks and TEDx and all that. So State Street Banks actually started their own TEDx internal program. And they let employees apply to talk about whatever their interest was. And they did a whole TEDx event. The CEO was there in the front row. And they were blown away by some of the things that they learned about people who've been working at the company for years, their passions, their talents, their interests. And so it's a great way to understand, well, you know, we have a tendency to pigeonhole people, put labels on them. So we really have to embrace the whole person and their talents. And then also we've got to encourage constant learning, not just for our team, but as us as business leaders too. You know, you get stuck in a rut, and you know, you're doing the same thing over and over and over again. You know, go out and try something new. Read, if you're, you know, I happen to not like sports. I'm not a sports person. Sorry, James. But you know what? I should pick up the sports page and read the sports page. You never know what idea I might pick up there. Maybe you want to go skydiving if you've never done that, or zip lining, or whatever it is. But those new experiences, that constant learning, really is what gets you inspired and energizes and helps you get those creative ideas. And I remember the movie Working Girl with Melody Griffith. You know, you might remember when Sigourney Weaver comes back after her skiing accident and the broken leg. Well, she's trying to take credit for this big deal that Melody Griffith had put together. And so they stopped and they said, so how did you come up with this idea anyway? And well, she was flustered and she couldn't answer the question. And so Melody Griffith said, here's how I came up with it. And she took a society page about a wedding, and then she took something else from some other magazine. And she said, I read all these things because you never know where the big ideas are going to come from. So we never know where our inspiration is going to come from. And the constant learning really can energize your entire psyche and ability to be innovative. And I love this saying from Richard Branson. He said, you train people well enough so they can leave, but you treat them well enough so they don't want to. And I think in today's environment, that's nothing could be said any better. We want to really value the people who are working on our teams. And once again, not just as a taskmaster, but as the entire person.
And that's a change I think that Susan, you've probably come across in talking to people, maybe even sharing that quote. That's hard for people because we have our egos there. We want to hold on to our ideas. We don't want to give that or train that to someone else because, well, then they might take over from us. They might become the boss. They might get the promotion. And I don't see that often happen. I see the ones that are willing to give and willing to mentor and share. Those are the ones that actually continue to succeed. And then their employees want them to succeed. They see them as a good boss, as a good leader. They support them, to the nines there. And but that is probably, again, to what we had said, there are probably a lot of people out there that are 210 degrees and they just need a little bit of a change to realize, no, I am going to let go of it. I'm going to let go of some fear. I'm going to help someone else out and realize that'll get them to that 212 boil, and they're going to take off in their careers.
Right, and honestly, this is going off subject just a little bit, James, but I wrote a book called The Girl's Guide to Power and Success, and it was sort of the precursor to Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In. But one of the things in my research and in writing this book, and I talked to hundreds of women from all different age groups, walks of life, different industry areas, etc. And the common theme that I heard a lot is women are more threatened by other women than they are by other men. So in other words, women are actually prefer working for a man more than they do a woman. They tend to sabotage each other, not help each other. I mean, it's really unfortunate because women, there's an old Chinese proverb that says women hold up half the sky, and I always say it's a lot easier to hold up if you own the ground you're standing on. I mean, we control the majority of the wealth in the United States, and yet if we would just come together and support each other, imagine what a difference we could make. And I mentioned the diversity study earlier in this program, and the same study also showed that it's also a significant increase in revenue and results for companies that are very diverse in leadership with women, and very innovative. So I think that's kind of a little aside and kind of got off subject, but I really think it is important to recognize egos are not important. What's important is to be collaborative, and I loved it in these organizations that are getting flatter, because we were talking before we started the program. One of the corporations I worked for, you could tell somebody's level by the size of their cubicle, and an entry-level manager got 1 chair. You go up to the next level, you get 2 chairs, and then you go up the next level where your office gets a little bit bigger. And I mean, really, do we really need those kinds of labels and those kinds of little marks on the wall to say this is who we are? That does nothing for the organization except to create internal competition. And on this slide, James, I've got one for all and all for one. I mean, I work with organizations that the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing, or they don't talk to each other, or they compete against each other. And you cannot build an innovative company when you've got silos within your organization of groups that want to keep their own little kingdom, so to speak. It's one for all and all for one. And as I said earlier, it's really important to motivate with purpose, understanding the why of your organization. Why are you doing this? And explaining that, being able to communicate it, and then your employees can understand it. They can communicate it to external stakeholders. Everybody's on the same page. And one of the reasons that mergers and acquisitions often don't work is because you've got 2 separate cultures, and yet no company really understands the why. You've lost the why. So it's important that you motivate with purpose. And you've got to help employees understand that they're there to contribute something more than just to the bottom line. If you're just in business to make money, shame on you. Yes, you got to make money. We've all got to make money. I love making money. But the bottom line is there's got to be something bigger than making money. And that's purpose, and why is the heart and soul of any organization. It's the heart and soul of any initiative or any strategy that you take in your company. And as Aristotle said, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And I truly believe that. And it's more than just following directions. And as I said earlier, millennials, they're going to question everything. And honestly, that's a good thing in today's dynamic environment. And you want to get creative. Go ahead.
Well, I'd love to get your perspective, because questioning doesn't equal challenge. in my opinion.
Right.
It's a little bit of a play on words and semantics and stuff like that. But if someone has a good question that gets you to think as a business leader, that I think should be embraced. That's something worthwhile. Now, if someone's challenging you, they're being mean, they're being whatever, there's a difference, I believe, there. But some people, I think, equate a question to a challenge of my leadership or my direction. No, it's a good thing. You, as a leader, should probably be questioning yourself more. Your thoughts, Susan?
That's exactly right, James. I think an innovative company has business leaders that are constantly reflecting on what's working, what's not working, and asking the tough questions. And they don't take offense to employees who want to question or say, well, is this really going to work? Or have you thought about this? I mean, you see it all the time. People step out, they make a decision, they start to work on it, and then whoops, things happen. Oh, darn, I didn't think about that. Those unintended consequences. Well, the more questions that are asked, the more you have time to think it through, to talk it through, to use that diverse team and their perspectives and their backgrounds, the better decisions your organization is going to make. Now, I realize everybody's got to step up to the plate and somebody's got to make the final decision, right? And as the business owner or a business leader, obviously you're the captain of the ship. But you really, really, really lead by bringing everybody into the fold, getting their input, and getting them invested in the strategy of your organization. And so part of the way to do that is to get the creative juices rolling in your organization is to give your team members think time. If you're constantly putting out fires, you're running around like my little dog Maxwell, he likes to chase his tail, and I mean, he's really busy, and he falls down and boom, but he doesn't get anywhere. So you've got to have that think time to look at the possibilities of where your organization could go. Now, Google provides an allowance for 20% of free time to their employees. And they're able to pursue their passions, their interests, work together in teams. And some of Google's best products and developments have come from this free time, this think time that they've given to their employees. Like Gmail came out of free time from some of their employee groups. And another thing is to have a really creative workplace. One of my first offices when I had my internet company was in a tired, rundown building. We had, furniture from Goodwill. It was a little dirty. I mean, half the time the restrooms didn't work. And, it was really, I didn't even like to go there. When we got a new office space that was brightly painted and everybody had great, desk and there was space and there was stuff to do things and lots of light, but the juices started flowing. I could see the whole change in the team, just that little tweak of where we were working. You've also got to get out of the office. If you're stuck in the office and you're trying to come up with innovative ideas or be creative, my gosh, those four walls are just going to come in on you, close in on you. You're not going to really get those creative juices going. As I said earlier, you've got to try new things, and by all means, you've got to turn off the autopilot. James, have you ever been driving somewhere and then you're just driving and all of a sudden you're like, where is it I'm going? I mean,
either where's it going or how did I get here? I know it was 20 minutes ago I left and all of a sudden I'm here and I have no idea how it happened.
My father's in assisted living in St. Louis and I drive to his assisted living place from my house frequently. And, I don't even have to think about the route. I just boom, go. And lots of times I'll find myself like driving to Daddy's instead of going where I should have gone because I'm just on autopilot. That's what we got to let go of. And it's not easy. I mean, we all are creatures of habit. So it's not easy, but that's what you have to do to build innovation and be competitive. And the other thing is you've got to give your team an understanding that this is a safe harbor, that, Bill Gates calls failure research. If it doesn't work out, so what? Learn from it and move on quickly. If you're not failing, then you're really not doing nothing. You're just standing on the sidelines. In fact, some companies actually have an award for the flop of the month. So, people want you to take initiative, to try new things. As I said, my old boss said, Susan, I'm giving you the opportunity to fail. And you have got to create that safe harbor for your team members, that they're not just saying to you what you want, they think you want to hear, not just giving you results that you want to hear, and that it always has to be a success, because no organization is going to be competitive or innovative if you're not failing once in a while. Now, what are the characteristics of an innovative employee? Let me just go through this very quickly. They need to have an entrepreneurial spirit. P&G got blindsided by the Dollar Shave Club, And now they're starting to hire people internally with entrepreneurial experience. You need team members that are self-starters, that have a strong initiative, that they sort of think out loud. You know people like that. They talk to themselves, or they, well, what do you think about this? They're brainstormers, and they're very restless. They're never satisfied with good. That's never enough. They're always looking for ways to do even better job. I think Jim Collins said, good is the death of great, and I think that good is not good enough in this marketplace. Our customers, our employees, everybody, they're demanding more and more. The bar is moving higher, and so you need employees who are restless and always looking for those enhancements. And you as a leader, as I said earlier, you can't micromanage, and you absolutely have to recognize achievements. It's really easy to criticize somebody for doing something wrong, but how often do you walk up to somebody, pat them on the back, and sincerely say, wow, that was really, really amazing? And you need to also provide people benefits. As I said before, you look at the whole person. The rigid 8 to 5 workplace doesn't cut it anymore. Do you have employees who need to work remotely? Do you have employees who need flex time? Everybody needs family time, because the lines between our work day and our personal time have blurred now. It's 24/7. You've got to keep an open mind. There's no judgments. There's no such thing as a dumb question or a dumb idea. And you really have to listen and watch for the unwritten organizational rules and behaviors in your organization. They can sabotage you. If you look at what happened with Enron, Ken Lay in the annual report wrote about integrity and values and on and on and on and on. But the unwritten rules of the organization were much different. And we saw what happened with Enron. You don't want that to be a subcurrent in your organization. And finally, you need to lead with integrity. Don't ever compromise your values. Once you've compromised your values, you're on a slippery slope. And you can't expect your employees, your team members, to live those values if you're not living them yourself. So, James, that's pretty much what I have to say. In conclusion, I would just say, there are a lot of things that really make businesses competitive. Your product, your services, the technology you use, all of those things affect your competitiveness. But if you don't have the right people, it's going to be really hard for you to succeed.
I'm not making anything up. I'm not saying something right here that people haven't been saying for years and decades. And, business is people doing business with other people. And so I think you've laid out a great little story here, and just good reminders for us to think about. Also, some of these ideas that Susan shared, as I'm sitting here listening, I'm like, I bet there's someone out there that's going to be a little bit afraid to walk down the hallway today and all of a sudden just say, hey, Josephine, nice work on that last project, because maybe that's something you don't do, but that's a little bit of a challenge to you now. You want the competitive edge, make that little change, start small, do something like that, and see what type of results you start getting. Susan, I want to go back to your boss. It gave you the opportunity to fail, and I'm going to ask you 2 questions around this. One, how often did you fail that boss?
Well, luckily not very often, but I did have a big flop once, and you know what? Everybody was supportive. It didn't work out the way we thought it was, but you know what? It was okay. I tried, we tried, and we moved on. We learned from it. We never did something like that again, and you move on. So it wasn't like, I was afraid I was going to get fired or something like that, and I think that's what a lot of employees think. If I don't succeed, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose my job. In my opinion, if you're just following the rules and you're going through the motions, then you know what? You are not an employee for an innovative company. And I truly believe that. In today's marketplace, we've got to be out there trying new things and learning from our mistakes.
The second question is, when you, as a leader, gave your employees the opportunity to fail, how many really did fail, and how many kept failing, or given the opportunity, fine, they fail, but they came back stronger, they learned from it, they continued to grow?
Yes, actually they did. I remember once, we did a project with a company, and I thought that it was a mistake, but they believed in it. They believed in it wholeheartedly. They were going to put forth their best effort to make it work, and it didn't. And unfortunately, we did spend a lot of time, and it took a lot of bandwidth from the business. And that's all money, right? Time is money. And but I said, okay, so what did we learn from this experience? We learned that this is not the business we're in, and we need to stick to our core competencies rather than shooting off some direction and trying something else. So let's just learn that, and let's go back and focus on what we do well.
Michael on board with us, and he heard your messaging here in terms of trying to be aware of your employees. Let the good ones go, because if they're not great, if they're just good and getting the job done, but they're not great, he sees the idea of really trying to strive to have an all-around great staff. Really the question Michael is posing, though, is that realistic? Or what is realistic? 85% of our employees being great, is that a number we strive for? Do we go for 95% of those employees? Do you have any thoughts, ideas, numbers in your mind around that?
I really don't, because it depends on each individual organization. But I can say this, a company that invests in A players is going to see a significant value to their bottom line. So you might pay an A player more money, but you're going to see the results increase and cover that extra cost in your bottom line results. So yes, you've got to have people who are willing to be more the task and project oriented team, but for those who are leading, who are working to grow your company and are innovative, you want the racehorses. You don't want the ones who are sitting there, tell me what to do, okay, I'm marking this off my list, so and so. You want those innovative people. And one of the things that is like fingernails on a blackboard, I don't even know if we have blackboards around anymore, but scraping your fingernails on a blackboard, one of the things that's like that for me is hearing somebody say, it's not my job. It's everybody's job to help the company succeed. And it drives me crazy when I hear that.
I want to go back to the motivate with purpose. And you said you're not a big sports fan. I am not holding that against you. No need to apologize. What I will say, though, is sports, it's a big part of my lifestyle right now. And the idea of the all for one and competing with each other as business teammates, I think is a real big challenge for a lot of teams. Within our family, we talk about Team Hilliard with my three kiddos, my wife and I. We try and, when we see our kids kind of competing against each other, we bring it back to, look, we're Team Hilliard. We compete as us five against, whatever the challenges are out there in the world. And how hard has it been for you to maybe convince some folks to start competing together for the success of a business? Because so many people do. They kind of silo up. They want to be the star of the team. I'm a big Golden State Warriors fan here. We've had a good run of luck for a while. We have a team out here that really plays for each other, and they talk a lot about that. If you watch older interviews of the players of the last couple of years, they talk about this brotherhood and how they're fighting for each other, and then they get to know each other and all. But that seems to still be a big challenge for a lot of teams out there to come together and let go of some of the wanting to be the individual all-star.
Well, I'll go back to what I said about building ACE teams, and collaborative was one of the words in there. I think that there's no room for prima donnas and egos in a really strong team. And I think if you see that, that's a person that's just not a good fit because they will be wanting to be the star. They're going to, when you're really pulling and rowing in the same direction, a win for one is a win for all. And even I'll go back to my book, The Girl's Guide to Power and Success. I said, you see people who get jealous of other people's success. And for me, I always sat back and thought, I'm not going to be jealous. A win for one person is a win for all of us as women. So let's be proud. Let's celebrate that success. And that's what you want with your teams. You want to share the spotlight. You want to share the successes, and you share the failures, the good times and the bad times. And that's what collaboration does. And that's what makes strong teams.
And that's what gives some teams a competitive edge out there. So good fun conversation. I was excited to see this come up on my calendar. Susan and I had almost crossed paths before in another project with another group, and it didn't quite work out, and all of a sudden this came up and it did pan out. So I was really glad to have this time with you here today, Susan. Appreciate you taking time to join all of us. Facebook.com/Susan Solovic. I just chatted that out to all of you so you can follow there. Obviously, you can also use that as SusanSolovic.com and reach out to her there at Susan Solovic for Twitter, and you can follow and stay in touch. We have recorded the conversation. I think it was Debbie. You were asking, was there going to be an online version? There is. Michelle and team behind the scenes over at Citrix ShareFile have recorded today's entire presentation. You'll get that reminder email that we always send out will bring you back to the on-demand version. We encourage you to share that with colleagues that you think could benefit from it, and not just colleagues, but friends, other folks, entrepreneurs in your circle. I think there's a lot of value that Susan shared with all of us, so I want you all to share the content. A couple other questions did come in here, Susan, so what I will do, we'll wrap that up in a little report. If there are a couple things that you can follow with offline, then we'll ask you to do so. Cool. Mario saying thank you very much for the presentation. Some other kind comments in here, Michael and others. So folks, glad you all enjoyed the presentation, the event here today. Again, the competitive edge. Look for the reminder email. Stay in tune with Susan. And with that, we will wrap things up so you can run on to the rest of your days. On behalf of the entire crew that put this together, my name's James Hilliard, and we do look forward to talking to you all down the road.